I've stood at that post more times than I can count. Rain, sun, wind so bitter it cuts right through the uniform, tourists clicking photos, children waving, hopping, you'll blink. You don't. You never do. That's the whole point of you, to be a wall with a face. A symbol. You stand there and you are the palace, whether you like it or not. That morning was a Tuesday, early October. The kind of morning London does, quietly grey sky, not quite raining, damp enough that the cobblestones shine like they've been polished overnight. I remember the smell. Wet stone and exhaust fumes, and somewhere nearby, a vendor's coffee cart warming up. That smell, that specific mixture, it's the smell I carry with me now whenever I think about what happened. I'd been on post since 6. My relief wasn't due until 9:30. I was maybe 2 hours in, just settled into the stillness of it, when the tourists started arriving. They come early, the dedicated ones. Families with rucksacks and lanyards, retirees with proper cameras, the ones with the long lenses that cost more than my monthly wage. A school group from somewhere in the Midlands, judging by the accents. The children kept pressing up against the fence, faces between the iron bars, breath making little clouds in the cold air. One little girl, red coat, couldn't have been more than 6 or 7. She held up a drawing she'd done. A guard in a bearskin with a huge smile drawn on. A proper crayon smile, ear to ear. I didn't react. I'm not supposed to. But I wanted to. I was thinking about that drawing, actually. The absurdity of that small joy in the middle of all that formality, when I first noticed the car. It was parked on the road, just at the edge of where it shouldn't really be. A dark blue estate car, older model, nothing remarkable about it on its own. London is full of cars sitting where they half shouldn't be. But something about this one caught me. It had been there when I came on post. I'd clocked it then without thinking much of it. 2 hours later, it hadn't moved. No one had gone near it. No hazard lights, no ticket on the windscreen yet. In 2 hours on that stretch, someone usually moves on. I filed it somewhere in the back of my mind, kept it there. Didn't do anything with it yet because, look, you get 1,000 small things nagging at you on a long post. A bin bag left too long. A man who walks past 4 times. A vehicle you don't recognize. Most of it is nothing. You learn to hold it lightly, to let it sit without acting on it too soon. But you don't let it go either. That's the training talking. Hold it lightly, don't let it go. The school group was being shepherded into a tighter cluster by their teacher, young woman, yellow high-visibility jacket, the permanently exhausted look of someone responsible for 38-year-olds in a public space. She counted them with a pointed finger, mouthing numbers. 28, 29, 30. Good, all there. The coffee smell got stronger. Someone nearby laughed at something. And then the car shifted. Not drove, shifted, like something inside it settled or moved. The suspension dipped slightly at the rear just for a second. You'd miss it if you weren't watching. I wasn't even certain I'd seen it. But my hands went tight inside my gloves all the same. I can't explain what happens in the body when something shifts from possible to real. It's not a thought exactly. It's older than thought. It moves through you before your brain catches up. A sudden cold clarity, like the morning air just got sharper, like every sound around you drops slightly in volume except for the sound of your own heartbeat. I broke post. That's the phrase. You're not supposed to. It's almost against the laws of nature, breaking post, after everything they drill into you. But there are protocols, real ones, buried under the ceremonial ones, and one of them is this. If your gut tells you something is wrong in a way that overrides the performance, you act. I moved toward the railings, the slow, deliberate walk that doesn't look like alarm, and I caught the eye of Corporal Harris. He was positioned further along, maybe 30 meters from me. I used the signal, a small one, the kind you'd only know if you'd been trained to look for it. He saw it, he acknowledged. Within 40 seconds, without a single raised voice, the immediate area around that section of the forecourt began to quietly, calmly compress. It doesn't look like what it is. That's by design. The tourists think a space is being cleared for a ceremony. for a car to come through, for something official and impressive. They move without being told twice. People generally do, if you're in uniform and you're calm. The teacher in the yellow jacket started organizing her group before we even approached her. She had that instinct, some people do, and she got those children moving back toward the pavement in a wide arc, chattering and oblivious, red-coat girl still clutching her drawing. I want to say I was thinking clearly at that point. Truthfully, I was running on something else entirely. Focus that has no name. I got within about 15 meters of the vehicle when it happened. The sound is not what films prepare you for. Films give you a roar, a Hollywood wave of destruction. What I heard was more like a crack first. A tremendous splitting crack, the sound of the world deciding to open. And then yes, after the pressure, that invisible shove that hits your chest before your brain registers it as a wave. My ears went wrong immediately. Everything became this strange muffled ringing, like someone had slipped cotton wool into the world. The car, the rear section of the car, it just went. Not a fireball like the films, more like a violent unfolding, metal peeling. The cobblestones in a radius of maybe 4 or 5 meters, they looked like they'd been scooped and scattered. Black marks, deep ones, wrong-colored marks on that pale stone. I was on the ground. I hadn't decided to go to the ground. My body put me there. For a second, 1 second I think, but it may have been longer, there was a terrible ringing silence. The kind that presses on your eardrums and feels almost peaceful. And in that silence I had one thought, a strange, simple thought. The drawing. The little girl's drawing. Then the screaming started and I came back to myself. I got up. My legs shook, I'm not ashamed to say it. They shook badly for about 3 steps and then steadied. I was looking for people down, looking for injuries, running the assessment almost without meaning to. Smoke was coming from the vehicle's remains, thick and oily, drifting east in the weak wind. The cobblestones around the blast site were broken and scattered. The perimeter fencing had caught debris. Harris was up, already on comms. I could see his mouth moving. The civilians, the tourists, the school group, they were backing away, most of them. Some had run, others stood frozen. Which is what people do, despite what you'd assume. A man in a gray coat was sitting against the far pavement, his face pale, looking at his own hands like he'd forgotten how they worked. I went to him first. No blood. He was in shock but breathing steady. I put a hand on his shoulder, held it there, said something I can't even remember now. He looked up at me. He said very quietly, "I was just taking a photograph." "I know," I told him. "You're all right, stay here." The sirens were coming by then. You could hear them cutting through the ringing, this distant wailing growing louder, converging from every direction, which is a sound that, once you've heard it at a moment like that, you never quite separate from the smell of smoke and cold stone. The school children were across the road, all 30 of them, the teacher with her arms wide like she was herding geese, her yellow jacket vivid against the gray of the morning. All of them standing. I counted. All 30 standing. The little girl in the red coat was being held by a woman I took to be another parent, face pressed against the woman's shoulder. The drawing was gone, lost somewhere in the scatter of the blast wave, most likely. That detail has stayed with me more than it should. The investigation took weeks. I was debriefed more times than I can clearly recall. At some point it all becomes the same room, the same questions, the same mug of tea cooling beside you that no one ever seems to drink. What I know, what was made public eventually, was that the device had been intended for closer. Something failed in whatever the plan was. A timer, a trigger, something. By chance or by whatever force guides such things, it detonated where it did when it did, rather than when and where it was meant to. 12 people were treated for minor injuries. Cuts, shock, temporary hearing loss. A few burns, nothing that took more than a few weeks to heal. The cobblestones were relayed over the following months. I saw them doing it later when I was back on rotation. New pale stone, clean and even, filling in the scars. If you stand there now in the forecourt, you'd never know. That bothers me more than I expected it to. That the ground heals like that. That a morning that changed the way I breathe in crowds can look, from a certain angle, like nothing happened at all. I think about breaking posts sometimes. Whether I'd be stood in front of some review board one day. Whether someone would have a reason to say I acted outside procedure in a way that couldn't be justified. None of that came. What came, about 6 weeks later, was a handshake from a man whose name I'm not going to write down, and a few words said quietly in a small room, and that was that. I didn't need more. That's not what you do it for. I did it because the little girl in the red coat was still holding her drawing, and I did it because the man in the gray coat was just taking a photograph, and I did it because that's the thing they don't put on the ceremonial side of the job. The reason the wall with a face has to be more than decoration. I still stand that post sometimes. The tourists still come. The children still press their faces against the iron railings. The coffee cart still smells the same in the cold morning air. And every single time I watch the cars.